Deep Learning with Pytorch, Understanding the Neural Network example. I'm reading the Pytorch documentation, and I have a couple of questions about the neural network that is introduced. The documentation defines the following network. Later on, the following statement is made. Let's try a random 32 by 32 input. Note, expected input size of this net, LeNet, is 32 by 32. To use this net on this dataset, please resize the images from the dataset to 32 by 32. Question 1. Why do the images need to be 32 by 32, where I assume that this means 32 pixels by 32? The first convolution applies 6 kernel to an image, with every kernel being 3 by 3. This means that if the input channel is 32 by 32, the 6 output channels all have dimensions 30 by 30, the 3 by 3 kernel grid makes you lose 2 pixels in width and height. The second convolution applies more kernels so that there now are 16 output channels of dimensions 28 by 28. Again, the 3 by 3 kernel grid makes you lose 2 pixels in width and height. Now I would expect 16 by 28 by 28 nodes in the next layer, since every one of the 16 output channels has 28 by 28 pixels. Somehow, this is incorrect, and the next layer contains 16 by 6 by 6 nodes. Why is this true? Question 2. The second convolution layer goes from 6 input channels to 16 output channels. How is this done? In the first convolution layer we go from 1 input channel to 6 input channels, which makes sense to me. You can just apply 6 kernels to the single input channel to arrive at 6 output channels. Going from 6 input channels to 16 output channels does not make as much sense to me. How are the different kernels applied? Do you apply 2 kernels to the first 5 input channels to arrive at 10 output channels, and apply 6 kernels to the last input channel, so that the total comes to 16 output channels? Or does the neural network learn itself to use X kernels and apply them to the input channels that it finds most suitable?
I can now answer these questions myself. Question 1. To see why you need a 32 by 32 image for this neural network to work, consider the following. Layer 1. First convolution is applied with a 3 by 3 kernel. Since the image has dimensions 32 by 32, this will result in a grid of 30 by 30. Next, max pooling is applied to the grid with the 2 by 2 kernel, and stride of 2 resulting in a grid that has dimensions 15 by 15. Layer 2. First convolution is applied with a 3 by 3 kernel to the 15 by 15 grid, resulting in a 13 by 13 grid. Next, max pooling is applied with the 2 by 2 kernel, and stride of 2 resulting in a grid that has dimensions 6 by 6. We get a 6 by 6 grid and not a 7 by 7 grid, because by default the floor function is used and not the ceil function. Since the convolution in layer 2 has 16 output channels, the first linear layer needs 16 by 6 by 6 nodes. We see that the required input is indeed a 32 by 32 image. Question 2. Every output channel is created by applying 6 different kernels to each input channel and summing the results. This is explained in the documentation.
If you want to see more, Приятель, что он себе фокусирует.